Happy Monday. Welcome back to yet another version of my first week of medical school. So while I technically started classes last week, it was just a transition getting you prepared for medical school. So we covered things like the difference between stress and burnout, basic like physical exams, things like that, the biopsychosocial model, just sort of really basic introductory things. And so this week we are starting our actual scientific principles of medicine block, which is essentially just like all of the really like basic science knowledge that you need for medical school. So there's some genetics, biochem, other things that I will find out. I think there's some embryology thrown in there. And so I officially started that today. So that meant that, as usual, I started my Monday morning with our PBL, or problem-based learning group. And so that's like a little small group session. We have the same group for 2 blocks at a time. So we had the same group last week, which was considered a block, even though it was only a week long. And we'll have that same group now going into this foundational science block. And so we start the Monday by reviewing the 2 cases and setting our own learning objectives. So normally there's learning objectives for any class you take or any course, but typically they're set by the teacher or the program. We get to set our own learning objectives based on the case, and we do have a facilitator there to let us know if we're like getting way too far off track and we're kind of going down a rabbit hole that wasn't really something we were meant to get out of that case. And then on Wednesday, we review what we found, what we've done research on for case number 1 for that week. And then on Friday, we meet again to review what we found for case number 2 for that week. So essentially, Monday we meet, we are introduced to the cases, we set our learning objectives, or essentially our questions that we want answered. And then when we do research on those questions, and then we talk about each case in turn on Wednesday and Friday. So we did that today. First thing in the morning, it's always our bright and early 2 hours we spend on PBL 3 times a week. And then because this is the first session of the year and they were still kind of uncertain about COVID protocols, all of our large lectures are on Zoom for this block. So we had 2 Zoom sessions. The first one was just an overview of what this block is going to look like and what we can expect. The second is an introductory to embryology, which I tried very hard to pay attention to. However, there was just a lot of other things going on that I was trying to figure out, like signing leases for a new apartment that had to be turned in by today and things like that. So luckily those sessions are recorded. They're not necessarily like mandatory, required for you to be there at the time that it's streaming. Some of them are, some of our Zoom sessions are, but most of them are not. And so that's just sort of like indicated on our calendar. Either it'll say required or it won't say required. And so I will have to rewatch that embryology lecture, but after that was technically done and I had finished working out some of my lease and apartment things, I then had a meeting with our financial aid office. All of the first year medical students are required to meet with financial aid and to set up a budget or do like a budgeting appointment essentially with them. And then we had a required AMC town hall on loans and debt management. So that was essentially the time constricted things for the day. I am currently doing the pre-work for tomorrow's classes. So we have our sort of clinical care class again tomorrow. Half of our class has that on Tuesdays, half of it has it on Wednesdays. So I'm in the half that has that on Tuesdays. So all of tomorrow afternoon, I'll be spent in our clinical practice class with a standardized patient. And right now we're just learning like history gathering and things like that, patient interviewing. So we have some pre-work and readings and things for that, including a TED Talk video that I am in the middle of watching. And then we also just had a quiz that is not graded. It's required to be completed, but you don't have to, it's not graded at all. As soon as you finish it, it tells you what the right answers were. And that was due today for, again, that clinical practice class that was testing us on the information we learned last week. So there's a lot of moving pieces. I honestly just spent like 20 minutes with a friend in my class just like going through to-do lists for the week and trying to figure out what we actually had to do and when, because we also have new this week that we didn't have last week, our independent lecture videos that are essentially just extra lectures that are recorded and there for us to watch at our leisure, but they do have to be completed by certain mandatory Q&A sessions that are going to be in person on the topics that are in the independent lecture videos. So they there's just a lot of moving pieces and a lot going on. We have 4 classes going at any given point, so I have them color coded like green, yellow, blue, and pink. So our green for me is like whatever the science, like biomedical science type block is. Then the blue is the actual clinical practice piece. Yellow is our health humanities, so that's the other pre-work that I have to do tonight because we have that class for the first time tomorrow. And then pink is health systems, and so no pre-work that we know of for that yet, but yeah, starting off the week with a bang for sure.
I would submit to you that the ritual of one individual coming to another and telling them things that they would not tell their preacher or rabbi, and then incredibly on top of that, disrobing and allowing touch, I would submit to you that that is a ritual of exceeding importance. And if you shortchange that ritual by not undressing the patient, by listening with your stethoscope on top of the nightgown, by not doing a complete exam, you have bypassed on the opportunity to seal the patient-physician relationship.
Yes, we have ectopic pregnancy. Excellent. Okay, so a lot of the ectopic pregnancies are because there's been some blockage of the fallopian tube along the way.
It's now time for health humanities reading on culture. So we have jumped ahead to Wednesday. Yesterday was just a very busy day. And just a very emotionally overwhelming for me because I had personal things going on. So, you know, we're students, but we're also humans. So we had 2 sort of like optional, they're not 2 streaming like Zoom lectures. And so you should watch them at some point, but you're not required to watch them live. They record them and you can watch them later if you want. So that was what I opted to do. And then we had 2 independent lectures, which just means that they were never streamed live, but they're recordings from a previous year or something like that, that they want to make sure that you review the material as well. So those lectures, however, the audio was a little funky, but luckily they included verbatim transcripts of what the lecturer was saying in the speaker notes of the PowerPoint that was posted. So that was good. And so you didn't necessarily have to watch if you didn't want to, you could just read. And then we had our first humanities class, which was on anthropological approaches to culture. So very interesting. We had to introduce ourselves based on a cultural object that we felt like described us somehow, or like our culture somehow. So I used my grandmother's clattering, which is Irish, and I have a decent amount of Irish descent. So, but everybody had some like really cool things. Then we did our clinical practice. So we had a standardized patient again. We elaborated on the case that we had from last week. Different standardized patient, but same case. Learned how to sort of add in more of the medical history, past medical history, family history, and social history, instead of just including in the interview, like elucidating the chief concern. So that was what we did last week, was chief concern. This week we added in some of the history stuff. So overall, it's a long day, but a pretty good day. I ended up just kind of like leisurely reviewing a few things to prep for my PBL this morning, last night, but otherwise I just kind of relaxed, took a little bit of a mental health break, which reminder that that's okay. So was only my second day of, real science classes in medical school, but it's okay. We're human. So today is a brand new start. Woke up bright and early for our PBL discussions. Our case today was on DeGeorge syndrome, which is a genetic condition. We're learning about genetics generally for this basic science section. And then we had a Q&A review of genetics. So that was it. That was the morning, done at noon. And so now I'm heading back home to catch up on some of the review I didn't get to do yesterday and prep for Thursday.
Most of the cells in the human body are somatic cells. These cells are referred to as diploid, meaning they contain 2 sets of chromosomes in 23 pairs like we just saw in the last picture.
You have a splice site altered, but that removal of that exon doesn't change reading rate. So in that case, you have a partially functioning protein, which
the medical complexities of patients.
Walk every morning and sit for like the hour before school, eat breakfast and early today.
Seeing how deacetylation leads to the formation